Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
So much about ourselves and learning like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting this, but that's not something that I'm willing to bend or break on,
Right.
Just knowing that you may be a little more rigid than I would like, within a partner. I just kind of felt like, I don't think that this is going to be good for me.
Interesting. I did not expect that. I don't know why I didn't expect that. That should be investigated a little bit, actually. But what I didn't expect, and I don't know about you, was that Brit would break up with Devon because of the way he reacted to her disclosure that she has dated women in the past. His reaction wasn't horrible, but it definitely wasn't ideal. I did not expect her to break up with him, but of course that would make sense. I mean, Brit can do what she wants to do, but that's a pretty, even if Devon and her were very much in alignment, there were a lot of good signs that they were going to work out. It's potentially at the tip of the iceberg, right? If Devon had that reaction, then what's going on underneath the water there? It's 2025. Devon is a young man. He's 28. He's certainly had enough of a life experience, I'm guessing, to have a less bigoted, let's just put it that way, perspective about bisexual people. She didn't say the term bisexual, but that's the term I'm using. I don't want to force a label on her. She specifically said that she's not interested in labels, but that's the way I would characterize it in my terminology. But anyway, at the very least, she says that she's attracted to men and women and has dated both. The fact that he reacted that way is one thing, and maybe that's changeable, but what else is going on? And if you're Brit, do you want to spend a lot of time laboring to get him to not be bigoted or to help him understand? Probably not, right? There are plenty of other fish in the sea that are also bisexual, for example, or are at the very least more awake. And then, like I said, what else is going on underneath there? What other rigid attitudes or problematic viewpoints or something? Devon hasn't shown any signs of that, but you could imagine. But I feel like it should be investigated. I should investigate why I did not expect Brit to do that. Is that some sort of sexist notion of, well, women don't typically stand up for themselves on the show or something? Or is it a biphobic thing of, well, bi people should just tolerate bigotry or suboptimal reactions to disclosures like that? Or maybe I was basing it on the triangle aspect, because Brit and Virginia were both going after Devon. And typically we won't see one of the pursuers end it at early, right? Usually once they're locked in, they're locked in. It might even cause a bit of a frenzy because it's just like, oh, it's something I can't have, and competition or whatever. So maybe I was biased in that direction. But I have to say, Devon seems like a good person, but Brit doing this actually is very satisfying. I don't want Devon to be harmed or to be insulted or hurt or labeled anything like a bigot or something. But for a bisexual person to come on the show, to disclose it and not be all busted up about it, to do it early in the process, something we didn't see season 1 with Carlton, and to expect, and that's another good sign, that Brit expected a better reaction. And that, I think, means that a lot of people do have ideal or at least better reactions than what he did. And that says something about society, maybe Minneapolis as a part of that, right? I feel good for Brit. I don't feel good because Devon is being put into this place. That's not what it is. But I feel really positive about how Brit is handling this. It's a good sign for her. It's also a really great model. The way she's even going about breaking it up with him, she is letting him down easy. She's standing up for herself. She's not being a jerk. She's not even the way she frames what happened. She's like, you're somewhat rigid, and she kind of chuckles, she's trying to soften the blow. There's a lot of other ways she could have put that. That's a nice way of putting it. I'm using much worse language, which may or may not be fair. Do you think it's fair? I don't know.
Each other's person.
No, I get it. And honestly, I kind of see it the same way as I don't think it was going to work out for us in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm just like glad that I got to get to know you. You're one of the most genuine people that I know.
Of the breakups on the show, this is one that is nicer. And he's saying that he was probably going to break up too. So is that further indication of bias or bigotry or problematic attitudes? Or was he headed in that direction before the disclosure? Hard to know. Didn't look that way because they had so much in common, Brit and Devon. And we'll never know because Devon would probably retcon the whole thing, even just unconsciously, as no, Brit was on the list for sure, but it was always Virginia from the beginning. And I didn't break up with Brit because of what she told me. That was not the issue at all. We'll never know, but it has the possibility of that, right?
I'll never forget the conversation between me and you and me expressing that and you kind of just speaking that life into me. I'll always remember that.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think I know the other girl that you're dating.
Yep.
I think she's a great woman, like very observant and like I love her. Like that's my girl.
Wow. How often do we see this? How often do we see this in the triangle where the other person will talk well of the person they're in competition with? So, wow, big thumbs up.
Very similar ideas and goals.
Yes.
I just need reassurance about the social causes.
Yeah.
And I know we don't have opposing viewpoints, but that has been so important to my life, especially in just the last couple of years. It's been very influential with who I am as a person.
All right, so this is interesting. We have Sarah and Ben, and she and Ben have actually been falling in love, seemingly. Ben has been very sure about Sarah. Sarah has been warming up and has been won over, I guess, by their connection and all the vibes. And Sarah, before I think taking the leap into being engaged, she wants to have another conversation about politics is one way of saying it, but she's framing it as social causes, I think is the phrase she used. So they're revisiting it, and let's see how this goes.
Help me with that. I don't want you to have any burden or any weight on your shoulder thinking that you have to teach me, because I do have that motivation to, grow into that and that internal feeling that we do have the same beliefs in these things, and yes, we will, be on the same side with these things.
That's encouraging, I imagine, if you're Sarah. And yeah, I'm thinking that's maybe the best kind of answer that you could get, because if he said something like, oh no, I totally am on board with everything that you believe in, well, we wouldn't believe that because he clearly indicated earlier that at the very least he doesn't even know what she's talking about. I wonder if they've talked more specifically and they just aren't including it in the edit because of time, or they don't want to trigger people in the audience or something. I don't know. But that's about as good of an answer as you're going to get, where he is saying that it's not her responsibility to teach him. That's a very complicated topic, actually, that sometimes is talked about in a simplistic manner. Of course, it's not her responsibility, but the notion that if he were to ask at some point, you have a belief in this area, what you know more about it, can you tell me about it? That wouldn't be unethical or immoral or a problem. She could say, I don't feel like it, because it comes from a trend or a problem in society when you have privileged people who will live in their privileged ignorance and will coast on that privilege. And then when they're alerted by underprivileged people, by oppressed people, that oppression is happening and that the privileged individual is participating in it, or at the very least isn't helping, then one of the defenses, problematic defenses, and a mechanism of oppression is the privileged individual or group will say, okay, well, educate me then. And then now the underprivileged not only has to deal with oppression and the stress thereof, depending on what it is, but they have to deal with economic disparity and discrimination and harm and marginalization, and now they have to educate the privileged people when the privileged people have all this extra time and energy that they could spend actually educating themselves. Yeah, it's a problem in that scenario, but in my view is overly applied to people having a conversation where one person knows more than the other is somehow like counter to social justice. It depends, is what I'm saying. So I don't know if he's saying that kind of thing. I don't know. But yeah, so that response was as good as you're going to get. I'm a little suspicious of it, though. I don't know if they've talked in detail, but in terms of the edit, he's basically saying, I'll come around. I will see eye to eye with you. He's basically saying that, right? How would he know that? Now, I've been saying this from the beginning, and we haven't seen it in the edit. I don't know what his journey was up until this point. And that's always a very important thing to at least wonder about and maybe ask about. If you took someone that had the completely opposite political point of view of you, from you, and just saw that difference, then it can be very upsetting and otherizing for both of you. But if each of you actually describes how you got there, then often, if not all the time, there's a softening. It doesn't mean that you don't still disagree, but you understand, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that pathway to where you're at. And it's not the cartoon version in my head of you waking up in the morning with devil's horns on your head and wanting to enact harm in the world. You're actually, in your way, trying to make the world a better place. So that's it. I still think you need to understand this and that. And if both sides do that, then there can be a lot of understanding and a lot of love and a lot less Twitter clickbait stuff. Anyway, so I don't know what his path was to the place where he says in an earlier date between the two of them, where he says, I just don't know about that stuff. Because you would have to actively have either a lifestyle or push things away to not know, right? Either he is a purposeful Luddite regarding Twitter and phones and the internet or something, or whenever there's a conversation or a news story, he just says, I can't deal with that. Or when he does see that kind of stuff, it just sort of goes over his head and he's just like, huh? Well, I don't know. Or he does have an opinion and doesn't want to say it because he knows he will be rejected or he'll look very bad on television, which to me, it's just me, but that seems to be at least a likely factor. That's being a jerk to him without any data. But it just seems to me to be the most likely answer. Now, maybe he truly is open, and that's what can happen when people will actually be in a relationship. One, a good sign of bonding and love is the merging. Both individuals will meet in the middle. That's actually a good sign. And it's not just with politics, but it could be with like where you want to live, whether it's in the city or outside the city, or how you tend to dress. This is one of the reasons why it's hypothesized anyway that older couples tend to look like siblings, because over time you just sort of gravitate towards the same things, the same outfits, the same facial expressions, the same way of talking, the same way of laughing, the same way of being goofy, the same movies and TV shows and activities. Like you just become, and that, it's just a natural progression of just being influenced by someone. It's easier to do things in the middle than to constantly be at odds, right? But it's also evidence of influence, of openness to that other person. Like, oh, well, that point of view in the past I would reject, but I love you and you have that point of view, so maybe it's not that bad. let me give it a second thought. So, there's that. But I would imagine what Sarah is hearing is encouraging. If she's looking for an excuse to move forward, I think he's giving her that. And I tend to believe him. I don't have any reason not to. But it'd be interesting to see how that would play out. And I'm guessing we would never see because the show doesn't go beyond a certain timeline. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.